Well, welcome everybody. Like we mentioned, we're talking about the annual planning session today. So you've got the chat right up there in your Zoom window. So feel free to use that and ask questions throughout the presentation. We're gonna just be talking through it. We'll answer them real time, or we can push it to the end into a Q&A section. So don't be shy. Feel free to give us feedback as we're going through things.
Yeah, Christina, as we like to say at Impact Architects, welcome to annual season. The leaves are changing, pumpkin spice is in the air, and it's time to reset for next year. Yeah, the pumpkin spice annual season. It really goes, from really right now. I mean, people, I know other coaches are doing annuals even as we speak right now, and we'll talk a little bit about that, about not getting too worried about the timing. But anyway, between now and mid-February is really when people start having their annuals. So gosh, hopefully you've got a plan or you want to do it. And today we'll go over a lot of the best practices and how to utilize the tool to get there.
Absolutely. So agenda, we'll do a quick intro, and then we're going to kind of talk high level what really is the annual meeting and like show you the typical agendas that you would go through, and you can obviously customize those. And then taking a step back, talking about like the preparation and like how you as like a team member might facilitate, or pulling in a coach is always a good option too. And then just some helpful tips around like the SWOT, the team building sessions, like things like that. So, and then we'll do Q&A, but don't hesitate to just throw questions in the chat as we're talking through things.
Absolutely.
So I'm Christine. If you guys have attended these before, I'm head of client success at 90. So just here to offer some helpful tips on how to use the software. And then we also have Jim.
Hey everybody, I'm Jim, and I am here to talk a little bit more. I'm a coach, and but I also help with all the coaches that use 90. So give you some senses of what, from my viewpoint, what are some best practices on actually utilizing the 90 is part of your operating system. And I gotta say, Christine, it occurred to me there's probably enough video of you out there that you probably are viral. I mean, you're probably you're amongst those people that have been watched a lot. I mean,
I have to tell you, I did meet a client the other day, and they were like, "Why do you look so familiar?" And then they were like, "Oh my gosh, I feel like I know you because I've just watched you for like hours." I was like, "Oh gosh, is that a good or a bad thing? I don't know. Hopefully my
no,
voice
it's
is
just a thing.
okay."
It's one of the things we'll start measuring about ourselves as we go into the future. How many
Yeah.
hours have you been watched total? How many total viewing hours have there been?
Yeah.
So, all
All
right.
right. So let's start with the what. What is the annual meeting? Jim, you want to kick us off here?
Yeah. So obviously it's the most simple way of talking about it. It's a 2-day strategic planning session. I mean, every company I've ever been involved with, whether they're running an operating system or whatever they were doing, there's always been a sense of hey, we have to get together on a regular basis to kind of look and have and make sure we have the right plan and move forward. And in almost all cases, we're reviewing the past year, like let's make sure we all understand what happened last year, and we look in the future within the business operating systems, especially EOS, where specifically on the agenda, we're always looking at the past year. We've got things we're supposed to have done, some numbers we're supposed to have achieved last year and last quarter, and we have to look at those and understand them. And then we want to look through all the stuff in our strategic plan, like make sure that we are still on the right track, because everything we're going to do from setting course for the next year should be dependent on making sure that we're all aligned on where we're going longer term. So, and so we've got some work to do every year, making sure that we thought about this, give it a moment, because most of us, Christine, and I've got some visuals on this later on. We can't spend a lot of time thinking about 10 years from now. We spend all of our time thinking about today and this quarter, maybe. But this is our one real chance to make sure that we're really aligned and we're as clear as we possibly be on what the future looks like. And because of that, we're also going to do some work on team health. There's so many articles that you can read right now. It's some great research on team health, and particularly trust being a real predictor of success for the business.
Yeah.
So some people are successful regardless of that. They can have a toxic culture and still make a lot of money. Not my favorite, but you can go so much further, faster, and for longer if you really focus on culture and trust. And it's a great opportunity to work on that. And this is really we want to make sure next year's quarterlies are good. For make sure those quarterlies are good, we're going to have to make sure that our annual plan makes sense. It really gets us to where we want to be. I've shown this picture a number of times where there's something way out on the horizon we're trying to get to, and what we want to do is make sure we have a good 10-year plan, 3-year plan, 1-year plan, quote plan. What I'm doing this week, all those things should stack up to make sure we're really going after the big thing we're trying to do, that BHAG we have out there in the future.
And we'll talk a little bit more about the agenda in a bit, but it's so important to have those 2 days, because even in this list, it's going to take so much time to review and look at like, what did we do? And once you have that kind of foundational understanding of like what we thought happened, what actually happened, you can better look at the future and say like, here's some mistakes we made. We're going to learn from them. Like, we want to make sure we're moving forward in the right direction.
Yeah, there's a couple people in the chat were saying that they're going to do their first annual. Hopefully, yeah, they're Wednesday, Thursday. Thanks, Dana. I appreciate that. Don't short yourself, because you'll get to the end of it and you'll say, God, we didn't have enough time to do everything we wanted to do. It's always the case. I mean, starting out new clients, they're always pushing back on the 2-day thing, man. It's like, holy mackerel, you really got to do it. There's no other way to get to that place where you're in that mind frame to make good decisions, and you got to prepare too. So we'll go over all that.
And I did not make these bullet points come up one by one, but kind of continuing off that conversation, like doing it right is very, very worth it, of having like the dedicated time, the going off site, all of those things. So like, put yourself in that right frame of mind.
I mean, people get to the point where they run quarterlies and they're kind of like, oh, we're in a sequence here of things, and we feel pretty good about that. But the annual really should be a special event. You really have to take yourself out of the context of what makes you successful in the quarterlies and get to a higher place. When Mark, our founder, Mark Abbott, talks about the concept that was really been made popular by Bridgewater, this notion of time span capacity, time span orientation. And we don't get to live in that level 3, level 4 space very often. So you got to create the environment where you can really have that longer term view of what could be. And you've got to create that environment. It's both the time you're going to spend on it and the preparation. Both of those things come together to really make it work. And it can be magical, it can be transformative as to how people see new things, and imagine if you've made a great annual, your next year can really be game changing. I just had a client that had their third quarterly after the first annual I worked with them on, and it was the best quarter they've ever had. Like, they blew it out of the water. And on top of that, they're just running so much better because we did a lot of work to make sure the last annual made sense and they had the right things, and they had to make adjustments along the way. But they were so clear on where they're headed overall that they were able to do so more effectively. I love you included the leaders building leaders. I mean, it's so, gosh, man, it's having that right orientation at night. You see so much of the stuff that happens on LinkedIn. It's all about, having the right mind frame. And this is part of it. We have to know that this is part of being a leader in the organization. You have to give yourself the time and opportunity to get super clear on where we're going, so you can go share that with everybody else, because then they got to share it to the next people that they talk to. And so being good at that is part of being a great leader.
Yeah, and I think that's like a really important takeaway from these sessions is each department is looking at the company as a whole, but also thinking about themselves. Like, where am I going to be like in that 2-3 year, and what am I contributing? And that way, as you're going into next year and starting to execute things, it's like, hey, Spencer on my team brings up an idea and I'm like, oh, you know what, they're working on that in marketing, go talk to so-and-so. And you're helping your team members like create those kind of cross collaborations too, which is nice.
Yeah. Brilliant opportunities for that. Great. All right.
Lots of ways to mess it up too. So trying to shorten it, doing it in the office, not being prepared for the meeting, like it's gonna set you up to create confusion and rushing through it and just feeling like you need to check the boxes instead of actually like really soaking it in and going through those best practices.
And a good coach or facilitator or implementer that, running your session is going to be more than likely to give you some prep work to do. They're going to ask you about where you're at and give you some prep work to do. I mean, with all my clients, I give them And I'll go through some of that when we talk about what goes into prep, but I give them a long checklist of things. I actually manage it inside 90, like here's all your to-dos, to go through, look through these things and take some notes and put them over here. But getting it takes some effort to get yourself in the right mind frame to be able to be really effective in this meeting. Because it's not just, oh, I'm busy over here turning the crank every day. Now I can come over here and think about 10 years out. Don't expect that of yourself. Nobody can really do that well. You've got to give yourself the ability to really be in the right mind frame. And this is the one meeting where even if you've graduated or you've never had anyone coaching you, having a facilitator for these meetings is super valuable, because you want to keep focus. You got more room for error, right, Christine? You can go off the rails. You want to make sure you're making progress. Someone's managing the energy in the room, making sure that no one beats up on anybody. There's so much rich opportunity for making progress here. It's good to have someone steering the boat for you.
And that's exactly what I was going to say. It's one of those things where like you as a team member can facilitate, and your team should pick one person, whether it is somebody internal for that coach. But it's nice to have that outside person come in, because I even think about, like, as I'm coaching like a sports team, I can set up the drill, but if I'm playing, I'm not seeing things. So it's just giving somebody who's like kind of sitting back and managing that energy and like looking at how things are going just from that different perspective, which is nice.
We say all the time, being an outsider, you get 30 extra IQ points. Because you've got a fresh perspective, and it's a good thing to have in the room.
All right, so let's go into some of the tactical, like what you should really be doing to actually prepare for this. Again, like an outside facilitator is gonna like have some of these tips and like even this email template ready for you to actually go to with your teams. I don't know if you want to talk through some of these.
And Christine, I meant to fix this. Don't email anybody. Put it in the tool. Give everyone to do.
There you go. Yeah. Yeah.
But the list is good. The list is good. These are all the things that I do with my clients. So the org checkup, this is there is an official free website that EOS Worldwide offers for an org checkup. A lot of my clients have moved on to other kind of tools for keeping track of where they are, but having some way of measuring your team's and your company's strength in all the areas. And when we look at the agenda, I'll talk through more how this really works, but giving you some sense of how you're doing as a company against some standard that you've got for yourself over time is very, very valuable. But yeah, preparing for all those rocks, making sure that you've looked through all the places where you might find rock opportunities and consider the stuff outside of what you consider every day.
Yeah, I usually go and I just add as much as I can or think of to that long-term issues list. So whether it's a rock for at any point next year for the upcoming quarter, if it's something that's been like a roadblock for my team, whatever I want to discuss, throw it on the long-term issues list. And then you guys will go through that long-term issues list to look at potential rock for the next quarter. And then also those topics that you're going to actually discuss during the meeting too.
We've specifically refactored the issues list so you can have hundreds of things on your long-term issues list, have it still sort appropriately. We've got a story behind that. And the SWOT. So, I mean, the thing that's further out than even your long-term issues is that SWOT. We'll talk a little bit about that today, because it is the one time we look at that is during the annual, because that's our furthest look out in the universe. But that, and just like you would look at your three-year plan, your 1-year plan, looking for opportunities for turning those things into things that have to get done this quarter to make sure we're on track to achieve those things. That SWOT is like a slightly out, a little further out view of what the world might look like and things you might go after. So, that's another one to start pulling into your consideration for the coming year.
And then the other big prep item is really just deciding what team health activity you want to do, because sometimes there is some pre-prep required, depending on what you choose. So I know sometimes if we did Colby, we did a strength finders, and everybody reviewed their scores there, or prep the questions you want to ask. So if you're the facilitator, just be thinking about that.
Absolutely. Yeah, so let's dig into this team health a little bit. I think it's one of the places where people try to cut time out of the out of the 2 days, and it's totally not worth it. Everyone that my clients have gone through this have found it to be so valuable to have gone through this exercise and get to know each other in a way they don't know each other now. So, and we talk about the Johari window in general. It's like there's things that I know about me and that others know about me, and that's part of that open side of things. But the other two, the blind and the hidden, are things we want to work on during team health. It's part of what we want to do. It's like, what do I know about myself that others don't know, that I can reveal to help them better understand me as a human? And then what are the things that others know about me that I don't know, so that I can actually choose to behave in a way that's more conducive to us being effective together. And sometimes just the sharing of that stuff, both in a loving, hopeful way, helps people get together.
And what I've really liked about what we've done is we've mixed the personal and the professional side of things. So like the example I just gave is like, we'll do an assessment and we'll talk about it. So like that might be more like kind of professional related of like how you're working with me, but we've also gone on like the personal side of just like, who am I? Let me share about my family, and I think both of those really contribute to like that trust factor of like, how I like to work, who I am. Like it's building that kind of foundation of it. I like this window concept. It's interesting to think about it from both those perspectives.
Yeah, because we're just trying to, get as much coverage as possible.
Yeah.
One of the newer ones we've been doing is this trust score, and this is if you check out the Mark Abbott's writings, he has a great article on trust, and my clients will like this quite a bit, where we're actually calculating trust on the team. We have a formula for this and a way to take through it. Having personal stories be part of this, like you were saying, Christine, there's a number of ways of approaching that. Having a list of things everyone has to answer, heroes, who's been helpful, things like there's a 4H model for that. There's also models for that. We're giving people that all have to answer the same questions. The one thing exercise, I make my clients do this every year. There's always something new on the team, one, and two, that we're digging in on the specific. But this is that thing, helping find that one thing that you can work on really personally, that makes you a better team member. And then always 5 dysfunctions of the team. This is if you're not familiar with the Patrick Lencioni book, it's a great one. There's a way of working through this to make sure that you all have a shared understanding of how functional and your team is. Quite often we forget this, Christine. I think as companies grow, you go up from that place where everyone's a trusted true believer, but they also kind of have like family type dynamics where things don't come out, and as they add new people, it kind of creates new fissures and stuff. So you got to touch all these things and look at them and be intentional about them. And then as you were talking about the profiling, I would add a new one every year. There are dozens of profiling mechanisms out there, and everyone gives you, if you know the old story of the 5 blind men and the elephant, they all describe the elephant a different way. It's another hand on the elephant, I like to say, to have the profiles and share them across each other and see how well you relate to that. And I had a great in my while I was in the mountains, I had a thought about, because I'm actually a high fact finder, but I actually do a lot of quick starty things, Christine, and it occurred to me, because I've realized that by just getting going and learning actively, what I call diligent patience, is my best way to learn enough so I feel comfortable at what I'm doing. Right?
Yeah,
so
we're in the same boat there. I'm not a quick start, but I'm not a perfectionist. So I'll just get going and figure it out as we're going. And so like that's the kind of fun stuff you figure out about your team members,
Exactly right.
Yeah. All right. So the actual agenda of the offsite, it's in 90 right now. So you can even open up your account and go look at it, and it's fully customizable. So kind of like what we talked about initially and what is that annual planning session. The first day is really focused on reviewing everything, the last year, the last quarter, doing some team building, looking at the SWOT. So a lot of big picture stuff. And the second day is really like, now that we have the context, let's look forward. So let's look at the 1-year plan. Let's go into issues. Let's create our rocks. And so I can show you all this in 90. And then I think it'd be good, Jim, to talk about some ways that people might customize this and like other resources that they might also want to include as well.
Yeah. So if I just leave it for a second, I just want the way I talk with my clients about this when I show them this agenda is that I want to just frame it up in terms of the team health section is about our relationship with each other. Okay. Then we go to the organizational checkup, which is about our organization's relationship with itself. Are we, as an organization, maturing ourselves? And then we start doing the journey of looking from the outside in, right? So from the SWOT is the giant market view of the world. How are we thinking about us in terms of everybody? And then the VTO is a like little closer in. That's like really examining ourselves. So it's just really your annual checkup, guys. So this is like, how am I doing against all other businesses? That's my SWOT review. VTO review is like, okay, really how am I thinking about it internally? My internal messaging about myself and where I go to the market. The 3-year pictures, that next tighter one in, now I can be kind of specific about where I is. And that's like how we're doing this. We're really doing a full sweep of all the different contexts of the business to make sure we're not missing anything. So we're eliminating all the blind spots as best we possibly can by looking at the organization and the people inside it from all these different contexts. So it's a great agenda. Which you can adjust, but there's all these, you want to check all these boxes as best you possibly can.
There's a reason behind everything here. So when we say customize, it's not like we don't really recommend removing anything, but if there's additional things you want to add context around, like you've got a financial or growth model you want to share, like you want to put in the org checkup scores that you just took, like things like that, like customizing the team building section, like that's more of how we would recommend coming in and editing things, as opposed to saying like, oh, let's, cut SWOT down to 30 minutes and, making concessions like that.
You can get more specific than we've given you here. And that's really the thing.
Yeah.
You can go through this and really, because it becomes that record for what you did last year that you won't remember next year. I promise you, when you're getting ready. So what did we do last year about this? It's going to be right here. It's going to be part of the record. So there's nothing here because it's a test system, but otherwise there'd be stuff here.
And so what you can do is come in. So I just clicked on the meetings page, and then there's just the settings button in the top right here. So when you open meeting settings, you can go into, there's a day 1 and a day 2. So when you start the annual, it goes into day 1. And then when you finish it, it'll give you the option to start day 2. So it's all within here in the system. And these, like we said, you can customize them all. What we would typically do in terms of customization is adding a new section. So whether that's pulling in, we've got a spreadsheet with our Colby scores on them, or whatever it is, you can throw in URLs, you can add details of like the questions that you're going to ask in team health, whatever those things are. So maybe we just,
whenever
you want to put it in
the organizational checkup, there'll be a response on that, and it might be an online thing, or it might be a resource you can put somewhere, but you can slug that right into the meeting in that spot, and so you can
so
do
that might be a way that I customize it, and maybe I want to leave this section as a setup, and we'll spend 55 minutes in here. When I save this, now I can exit. Maybe I want to go in and like actually start an annual meeting so that you guys can see what that looks like. A lot of these sections are pre-filled. So here's the default org checkup we get. And then here's where I could have my school show up, or whatever I put into this custom section. So that might be a way that you guys want to customize.
And just so, that's whatever other web resource you've got, it just flows right into the white space there. So that's for the, I know we still get questions sometimes about how can I customize the meetings. It's like this, and it's a fantastic element of how this meeting tool works, because nothing's off the nothing can't be embedded. Basically, you can do anything you want.
Yep. And if I give you an example of that, like in this as an example, if I wanted to just like put the presentation that we were just doing, it would just pull up exactly like what you would see in that window. So it just has to be an iframe friendly link.
Love that.
Cool. Well, that's mainly what I wanted to show on the initial like setup side, as far as customizing, and then some options that you might want to throw in there. So next up, I'd love to like talk through some of the tips that you have specifically, Jim, around like this additional context.
Yeah, so this is a tool developed by our good friend and my colleague at Impact Architects, Chris Snyder, to help people start to frame up. And there's a couple of degrees to this, so I'm going to talk you through it. You should be familiar, hopefully, with this notion of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's that notion of as humans, if we're in a place where our physiological needs are not met, it's hard for us to have higher order thinking. If we're really just trying to we don't get enough food, we don't have enough water, then gosh, man, we're not going to write great poetry at that point. So we want to be able to get ourselves above that space to be more productive, to be more who we want to be. The same thing happens with companies. Companies start out quite often they're survival mode. They've got a handful of customers, handful of employees. They're not quite sure where everything's going. And the important thing here we like to talk about is when you're in survival mode, you shouldn't spend a lot of time thinking about 10 years from now. It doesn't add a lot of value because you don't know enough to what you and I were just talking about, Christine. You can't pretend to know what 10 years looks like if you haven't figured these things out. But as you're able to move and spend more time above these things, it's like, if once you've got your food and your water figured out and you've gotten maybe some clothes on, you talk about safety. You want to get as a person, you want to say, okay, now I'm worried about just not being in danger from other things taking my stuff or hurting me. Same thing with businesses. They rise up to this place where, hey, now I've got a couple of things figured out. I'm a sustainable business. I know I can make money. Now I have to make decisions about where I want to make money and what's long-term and look like this. And you can see that as I rise up, I get to the place as an individual where I feel like I'm belonging. As a business, I get to the place where I'm scalable now. I'm making decisions about how I want to grow the business and in what way. And the most important thing here is that talking about how far out of a vision you want to be really solid on. So if you're in survival mode, you probably don't need an annual. Christine, you get your big couple things figured out before you bother with an annual. If you're that small, right? If you're that started, it's not going to add a lot of value. But as you move up, it gives more and more value to helping you have this vision of where you're going to go and how you're going to get there. The story I always tell about this is, there was Jeff Bezos. I've seen pictures of it. Him on a folding table in a crappy office somewhere in the 1990s, putting books in boxes and taping them shut. Now, yeah, in survival mode, it makes sense for Jeff Bezos to do that. But when you get by the time he was done being CEO, he would spend his whole day making 3 good decisions that impacted the business 20 years out. Right? That is a fully realized business. Someone spends all their time thinking about 20 years out. You're not like that probably, unless you're Amazon. So you've got to make this time to think about that far, being that far out, thinking that far out. Give yourself the space to do it. Prepare yourself for it so you're able to make good decisions. And the other part of this is you don't live in any one of these zones. You're always moving between them, Christine. So it's like if you give yourself that time to think about 10 years out. Give yourself that space. Like, what if everything we're working on is completely right? What does it need? What needs to happen? And give yourself the space to make those kinds of, ask those, those mental games of trying to sort that out. Then you can do a much better job. But it just takes time to do that. I want to also point out, one of my clients pointed out that, hey, it seems like our people all feel like they're in the belonging stage, but we're just unsustainable, right? So it was a great point. You can't, if people are worried about their safety, they're not going to do a very good job of trying to get to this achievement level, right? You got to that's why we do the team health. You want to get people feel like they're belonging. We want to make sure they're connected to the purpose of the organization. They have purpose and our purpose. So these things do line up. If you want to mature and increase the team health and the individual health of your team members to help you as a group rise to the top of this, to the point where you're fully actualized.
And this probably plays into like every quarterly, every annual that you are doing these team health exercises, looking at the VTO, like taking these actions, like all of those are really helping you move up the ladder and get to a place where you're creating a better vision, communicating it better, like all of those things. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah. So I mean, even if you're a sustainable business, right? So you've got your sustainable at your quarterly, you want to look at your 3-year picture. You should have one at that point. It's like, yeah, I'm sustainable. I've got this kind of vision, this maybe murky vision of what 3 years looks right now, but I'm looking at it every quarter and going, is there anything on here I should be working on right now if I'm going to be on track to achieve my 3-year version of my vision? So I think it's great stuff. So hopefully that's helpful for folks. I mean, I just find it endlessly interesting to think about this in this way, and knowing that you've got to give yourself the space to go live in the Jeff Bezos world 10 years out. You're not going to live there. Maybe someday you will, Christine. I have every faith. I may not get there. Hopefully you'll keep me around.
So tell us
the
about
other-
the SWOT.
the SWOT. So we don't get a lot of chance to talk about this, especially for companies that are self-implemented. There's a lot of resources out there on how to think about your SWOT. You should decide on one. Not just, don't let everyone come to the meeting with a different idea about how to think about SWOT. So ahead of time, if you haven't done it yet, agree on an organizational strategy around how you think about the SWOT. But it's a great way of kind of breaking down the giant world of outside our organization and where we fit in the world. And then there is no right or wrong answer. It's a tool we use for taking apart that giant where we sit in the marketplace and turn it down some places. It's also a great set of inputs if you want to do the Porter 5 Forces analysis. For those of you who would like extra credit, you can look that one up. There's Harvard Business Review has a lot of great materials about the Porter 5 Forces analysis, which is really the kind of the gold standard for really thinking about yourself in a larger marketplace. But this is like the SWOT is like a simplified version of Porter 5 Forces. But if you do this on a regular basis, it becomes a great place where you can put things that don't necessarily belong in your long-term issues list. If it's way, way, way out there, you don't need to clutter your long-term issues list. I know Chris Snyder does this with his clients. Hey, that's probably 10 years out. Let's just put it on the SWOT, because once a year we're going to look at the SWOT and pull things from it to go into our long-term issues list. Because hey, is that something we should work on this year? We should do something about that. And my clients, we actually go through and we think when we put things in the SWOT, we put time frames where that's likely to be. We'll capture notes on, hey, this is probably 3 years out, we should look at this, or this should be 5 years out, we should look at this, or we put dates in there. This is also a place where you want to start gathering research, right? So one of the nice things about the issues list in the 3-year plan, there's a lot of space for putting in details. When you think about the SWOT, you probably want to think about other things to go look at and read to prepare yourself for the meeting. So quite often we assign reading or watch some videos before our annual, because I want you to change your mind frame a little bit. I want you to think about things in a new way, and the SWOT's one of those places where we can put those things. So that's my 3-minute teaching on SWOT. Was it 3 minutes or was it 5? Hope no one's taking
Oh, I should have started my Watts. I don't know.
I'm sorry.
No, it's great. I think I like what you said earlier about, there's a reason why it's before VTO, because it's helping you get that bigger marketplace view before you start really focusing on yourself. So I think even thinking about the structure of the meeting, it's nice to think about it in this way. Yeah,
you start further out, you start getting down, and that's always how we think about it, right? Even the quarterly, we start big and we can get down and down and down to the point where, I need to have 13 milestones so I get my rock done.
Yeah.
But it's only really a great rock if it's actually based on where you're getting to your BHAG. So
yeah. And I wanted to throw this in here because I feel like it's a question that comes up with our clients. Once the leadership team is up and running these consistently, it's the question of, what do I do with my departments? And I know for us, every department doesn't necessarily have a 2-day offsite, but we are still running an annual meeting. We're focusing on a little bit more of the bigger picture, pulling the people that are right below us, with us along the way. So I don't know if you go through any tips with your clients in particular on this kind of stuff too.
Yeah, there's a handful of different approaches from different coaches that are out there for how to do it. But yes, everyone in the software, we support every team having their own marketing strategy, 2-year picture, whatever that is, that kind of longer term goal, the 1 year and then your quarter. So every team gets that. The leadership team is the only one that gets the top of the VTO, the top of the vision stuff. But and it's important to know which things everyone has to align to, and every team should be supportive of the larger company goals. All those things should line up, and quite often, we haven't done it yet, but I know it's been discussed. My teams often put, hey, they'll name each of their 3-year goals with a theme name, and then anything that's working towards that, and any of the team layers or any of the even rocks, gets that like tag against it. So
Yeah.
we know it's adding up to that. So everyone really clear. This is why we're doing this right now. Typically, those leadership team, below leadership team, they're shorter. But you should really, it isn't about how much time you spend, it's how much work you have to get done. And I was thinking about, like, for us, we've got a couple new departments, and it seemed to me like those guys should probably do even longer meetings, because they have to, they're building this infrastructure for their department. Whereas, I mean, folks, we added a bunch of people to 90 over the last year. And so there are things that, Christine did, 10 hours a week before that. Now there's an entire department there doing.
Well,
So,
I really actually like thinking about even like each team in this kind of hierarchy, because depending on where you live in this hierarchy, you might need to spend more time in your annual because you don't have that foundation set up and you're trying to like take more action to move up to that next level. So
that's a great insight, Christine. That's exactly right. Because I mean, so the first time you go through this, like if you were going through an implementation with an implementer, you probably, you set your first 3-year plan, right, in place. And then when you come through every year, you change the date and you say, which of these things are going to be different in what ways next year, right? So just like push it a year out. And so, and update it, which things have we gotten done, which things we're going to do differently. And every time we consider those things, we take more and more notes in them, right? So you get a lot of infrastructure in place once you've done this a couple of years. But you have a net new department. They really have to go through their own full implementation. Now, for some of my smaller clients, or for various reasons, like I've got some clients that I just do, like we set the foundational tools in place, and then we start catching up with some of the vision stuff over the next couple of quarterlies, right? So that's one way of thinking about it. But for us, we really want some of our newer teams to catch up, right? So they need to spend this kind of time to make sure that they really got everything layered in, locked in, and have something to build from, because it becomes much easier after that. But it's a big lift to get it going the first time.
And I threw it in here just in case anybody was interested, but we are setting up a new training cohort. So for companies that are just running at the leadership team level, if you're looking to bring your managers and help them be facilitators and like leaders within their own department of even running the weekly meetings, which is, maybe you need to have that annual session, which can kind of kick off a team actually getting in and using the weekly meeting tool department wide across the company. We have a training cohort for that. So it'll be a small group of companies. You'll get a little bit of training once a week, go take some homework, come back the next week and talk about it with the group. So if anybody's interested in that kind of training cohort with us, it's completely free. Happy to share out the link in the follow-up email if that's helpful.
Yeah, and it's worth saying. I mean, so I've these guys have been including me in what they're working on, and it's really great stuff, Christine. I mean, they're really done a good job of like limiting it to what's the things that these people have to get good at and feel confident about. So it's enough time that they get confident about doing the basics of being a leader or manager on a team below leadership team. But there's no coaching involved. They're not doing that stuff, but they're embedding a lot of great learning in the rudiments of execution of these things, and how to use the 90 as a tool set to actually stay on track. So we've already had, I know we did some tests of this earlier, had some great success. And a couple of things we had to make changes on to get there. So this is a pretty well mature program. So I highly endorse it.
And Gary just asked a great question too. When we're thinking about the department level, are implementers and coaches a part of those meetings as well, or is that really just run by the company themselves?
Yeah, so there's no, I mean, in pure EOS, the implementers typically work with leadership teams, and that's what pure EOS is all about. So, but I know plenty of implementers and other coaches that do work with other teams. I mean, as part of my role at 90 and helping develop product for coaches, I've done plenty of these other kind of sessions to see how they're different and be able to give guidance on how to put together a program like that. So there are you don't need to have somebody, but the one thing I would keep in mind as you move further down the organization, chances are the business maturity of the people involved is probably lower, right? Because you just by nature of it, they're going to have, they're better technicians, but not necessarily great leaders or managers in their business. So making sure that there's somebody that's a good leader in all of that is important. Helping make sure that they're staying on track and it's valuable time, and that they feel like they're learning things, right? This is part of our leaders building leaders. So someone to facilitate is a yes. You should definitely have someone facilitate, whether it's an outside coach or implementer or someone internally that owns that. Quite often, I always suggest with companies that are of any size, really, that are self-implementing or graduated, someone needs to own maintaining the business operating system, and probably needs to own make sure these other teams are doing well and have the resources they need to do it well. So learning what they need to provide it. So yes, I facilitate, but there's a lot of options for how to go get that solved.
Yeah, and I feel like if you don't have that internal facilitator yet, usually the integrator, then maybe you would want to hire a coach, and we're happy to like help connect you to somebody in that case. But if even just your integrator like wants more training about how to do this and like meets with a community, we have like peer groups we can recommend too. So you're welcome to connect with us, and that might also help like that internal person get trained
love
up.
to give you all access to those resources. We've got, I don't know, 700-800 coaches that have used 90 in their practice that we can refer you to as well if that you want. And it's worth talking to somebody to see what they think it's appropriate as well. Most of the folks that we work with won't sell you a coaching day unless they think it's warranted. So.
All right. Well, I'll send all of those in the follow-up email, how to like look into our coaches, our peer groups, and this cascading 90 cohort in case that's good follow-up steps for anybody out there.
Absolutely.
So you guys have asked a couple questions in the chat. I don't think we missed any. So feel free to throw more into the chat area, into Q&A, just raise your hand and we'll bring you on, whatever is helpful.
Lewis asked about iframe. I guess we're mentioning a technology we should probably explain a little bit, Christine.
Yes. So iframe friendly, is really just, does the website allow the website to appear on other sites? So something like these Google Slides, like these are open and shareable with the public. And so I am allowed to take that and actually put it into 90 as a part of the meeting agenda. So I think if I start up an annual session, we'll see what I did earlier. I think I saved it.
I don't know if you saved it.
There we go.
Yeah.
So I added this link into the detail section of the meeting earlier, and now it's actually just pulling up the web page inside of 90. So if I were to make updates here, it's literally as if I was making updates on the actual page outside of 90. So it's just a way to pull that information in so you can stay in the agenda, you can keep creating issues, you can still like live in your meeting ecosystem without leaving.
Yeah, and if you're so obviously we're a Google shop here at 90, but if you're a Microsoft shop, anything that's saved in the cloud basically can be, there's more controls on the Office 365, in the universe. So you may or may not be able to embed stuff, but give it a shot. I mean, it's you can let's stop this and show people again where it lives. But you can drop a link to any kind of resource in there, and there's a button for testing it, right? So
so new section, and you can do this weekly, quarterly, annual, any meeting type. So all I did was add a new custom section. Once it opens up to the right, if you already have it, you might need to click on the three dots. You can load in the URL right here. So that's where you would pull it up. Let's see.
And quite often, especially when you're getting down to teams below the senior leadership team, there's probably core systems that you absolutely need to have to look at things. Like if you're using HubSpot, there's some reporting on HubSpot you want to look at to make sure you're on the right track. So like in all of our weekly meetings on our partnerships team, we're always looking at HubSpot in a couple different reports that are on different sections. So you can just, the report specific section pops up in the meeting, looking for issues. So if you haven't played with that a little bit, definitely try it. The chat box can help you with that too. There's some great, I think in the customizing meeting agenda, there's some instructions there as well.
Yep, I posted the help article, and when I pulled it up, I have really long hair. It was crazy. But go check that out, watch the video. It'll show you how to do it, but our team's happy to help if you just use the chat right there.
And you'll be
And I
helping
also,
Christine with her total viewership number for her life.
yeah,
It'll-
yeah, you can see when the video was made based on how long my hair is, I think, So it's a little interesting experiment
I
there.
love that. Okay.
All right. Let's see, Joe, this often becomes a budget issue. Oh, talking about coaching, research. Yeah. I think that's the interesting thing about what you were talking about, Jim, just the idea of having the coach for the leadership team level. And then if that integrator is coached up into doing it at the department level, you're not spending for the coach and the coach and the coach, but it might be a good place to start just to get everybody on the same page. So that's definitely a good thing to research and look at expectations company to company of where you need to get.
Yeah, I mean, I think we really believe in coach fit, right? The coach becomes an important part of who you are. You have to have a lot of trust there. And EOS is why they do the 90-minute meeting. It's at our place. This is why we do the fit meeting, and it's both ways. I mean, am I a good fit for you? Am I going to feel like I'm going to do a great job with your meetings? Am I, are we going to enjoy the time together? So it's worth talking to some folks and seeing, find the ones that you feel like a connection with and feel a lot of faith in. I mean, it's a high trust moment, and you want someone in the room that you're going to feel free sharing with. So, but I got to tell you, I mean, we have hundreds and hundreds of coaches that I actually adore, Christine. The people that use 90 on a regular basis. They're all very, very different, but they're but our colleague Michelle does a great job of placement. So if you're looking for some stuff, she's an empath and can tell you exactly who you're going to fall in love with. So it's magic. It's definitely magic.
That's what whenever somebody's like, I'm thinking about a coach, I'm ready to interview a couple people. I'm like, all right, just go talk to Michelle. She'll ask you some questions and give you exactly the 3 people that you want to call on the phone.
Yeah, absolutely.
What other questions are there?
I guess, well, the one thing, that we didn't end up harping on, that I always harp on with my clients, is that as you're building out your 3-year, it's a great place to keep adding notes every time you touch it. I know you do a great job of that, Christine, and it occurs to me, it's probably why you didn't think of it, because it's such a natural thing for you.
Yeah. And you know what else we do too is we also assign these owners. Eventually we'll be able to just click and put somebody's face on here. But if this is a new website instead of location, like we're talking marketing, so we're talking about Michael here. So even getting into that level where you're actually saying like, hey, I want to be able to look at one person and ask them what they're thinking or what their plan is, or have them fill in that description of like, what do we think this actually looks like? It's a good place to start kind of making this a little bit more tangible year over year.
Yeah, I mean, and you can put anything in there. I mean, we put, because once again, we're a Google shop, there's constantly links to Google resources are in there, where we're a Domo shop. So link to Domo reports that are inside these things. Narratives on things we talk about inside meetings when we gather the ideas. You can see the attachments button there. So adding resources in there, because things change. Some people win the lottery, get abducted by aliens, and you want to be able to have this stay with the company as long as you need to, as part of the learning of the organization. So the more you're able to keep packing things on here, you see the comment section there. So if you don't own it but you want to add comment to it, and you can have your own rules about when you type in the description and when you type in comment. My clients have different ideas about that, but actually developing that record so that as you get closer and closer to these things, you actually have lots of ideas, because then they become then the seeds. You can see, just like with everything else, it could become an issue that then becomes a rock, and all that flows through. So you're never starting from scratch. You've always got a lot of materials to start from. And no one's going, oh my God, I got no idea what to do first. Well, you're going to read all this stuff that we've been capturing for quite some time, and then start asking questions about these things. And that's your first couple of milestones.
Well, I can't wait for the software to actually do this. And now that I'm not head of product, I can say that and look at somebody else, which is great. But if you think about this 3-year goal, like a lot has to happen in order for this to like come to life. And so you might start writing some of those things down. Maybe this one item becomes a 1-year goal. And so then you've got your 1-year goal right here. And maybe in your 1-year goal, you've taken more notes. And then there's, maybe these 2 things are rocks next quarter. And then the next 2 things are long-term issues. And so you can start to see how things kind of build up to what you're ultimately looking to achieve, even at like the 10-year level.
That's right. Okay. Well, I'm out of tricks and stories at this point.
You're
Yeah.
never out of stories. You're just holding back.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I'm trying not to be obnoxious.
All right. Well, if anybody else has questions, feel free to shoot them over. Like I said, we'll have a follow-up email, and I'll make sure we have those resources around coaching, our training cohorts, and any like peer groups that your integrators might want to get connected into. And feel free to shoot over an email. Any other questions?
Yeah, I mean, we'd love to
Next
help
topic you want to see?
We'd love to have you have a great, super valuable annual where, I think one of the tests of a great annual is not only do I feel more connected, not only do I feel more, focused, but I feel like I really learned something that's going to change the direction of your business. You've gone deeper into understanding what that top of the pyramid is, that actualization of the organization. What does that look like? A lot of my clients, when I start with them very early on, they're like, I'm not even sure what that means. I know you're gonna get, but that's part of the journey. We're gonna get to the place where you come up with a definition for that, and then you're so clear on what has to happen next. And even if it's just directionally correct, it's not entirely correct. Now you're moving with purpose, and there's nothing better than having a whole team of people you really like working with, all lockstep, headed towards your purpose. So I'm gonna get myself all choked up again.
Well, that's all we got. So thank you guys for joining. And we'll be here next month.
Thanks,
We'll
everybody.
see you then.
Christine,
All
always
right.
a pleasure.
I know. Good to see you. See ya.
Bye, everybody.
Themselves on the pyramid. Ooh, Joe, we're creating a way to do that. It won't, I don't think it's exactly the pyramid, but we are creating like kind of a competency assessment. So I think maybe one day we should have the ability to do it in that pyramid style too.
Yeah, well, I've got a long description that I haven't given to product yet on the ultimate decision tool, which is basically, what if we could take anything from like a SaaS Academy, which is all based on a bunch of geometric shapes, and put words around them in any way you like, and that becomes part of your vision statement. I think why not?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it should be.
Everybody's got a way of breaking that down, something that they think is genius, and let's just enable them to be genius in their own way. So
yeah, you want to use circles, squares, triangles, have at it.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. We'll see you guys later.
Thanks, everybody.